couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Friday morning, Joe Thomas in the morning, but I'm going to cede the stage for a moment to one of our former presidents at a commencement address.
The challenge of the next half century is whether we have the wisdom to use that wealth to enrich and elevate our national life and to advance the quality of our American civilization.
You hear it?
Your imagination and your initiative and your indignation will determine whether we build a society where progress is the servant of our nation, or a society where old values and new visions are buried under unbridled growth. For in your time, we have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society.
And there it is. Though he technically began the campaign during the State of the Union address just a few months earlier, that's approaching 60 years from today. We're less than a month away from the 60th anniversary of that speech, mostly, in conjunction with, because you hear all the things laid out to where we are now. Your indignation, this becomes currency. Your indignation becomes important to your place in the world. Now he goes on to say exactly what that great society is. Do we still have President Johnson's statements there? Because I want to get what he's saying this great society is going to be determined by. Can you go back to him, please?
It demands an end to poverty and racial injustice, to which we're totally committed in our time.
I think we need to go back a little bit further than that.
But upward to the great society.
There's the payoff phrase.
On abundance and liberty for all.
Abundance and liberty for all. That's the payoff pitch. And I bring this up as the Federal Communications Commission yesterday brought the great internet back, the great internet of net neutrality, where everyone will have the same abundance that Lyndon Johnson promised us in our great society. But of course, we realize now what is in an abundance in our great society is poverty. And what will be in abundance in our great internet society of the Federal Communications Commission will be much the same. You will have all equally crappy internet service because nothing succeeds like a public utility, does it? This is, again, all part and parcel of the political godchildren of Lyndon Johnson, who started it all. I mean, he really is the founding father of the woke squad, where your indignation is your capital, where your slogans become policy. And so net neutrality may say, "Oh, Joe, what, it's because you're not broadcasting." But this is the great internet society. This is, we will take away your ability to have something great so that everyone can have the same crap. And you say, well, but Joe, but what about the Supreme Court? And what about this Hamas guy? And oh, but the latest from Israel and immunity, the Supreme Court and the presidential immunity. And weren't you at the 7th Congressional District? All these stories are seemingly so much more headline grabbing than net neutrality. But it's, to me anyway, and your results can vary. That's why we keep the email address at jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. Yes, ironically, because we have no radio right now, but it's coming. Or you can call 434-882-4217 if you agree or disagree. Agree to disagree, but disagree the part. That's the things we do for love. But this is in a world where the internet has become Main Street to many businesses and things like that. This becomes the government saying, where are your papers? You say, there's a great story our friend John Sutz unearthed from the UK Daily Mail, I believe, on all the ironies of the woke crowd, how all of a sudden swastikas and terrorism is good. Because it's about the oppressed Muslims, the oppressed terrorists, the oppressed anyone who's not from the West, including apparently the Germans of the mid-30s. But we'll get into all of that coming up. But this net neutrality is just another step. This is like Obamacare, but there's been no vote. There's no Mike Johnson debate over whether the speaker is capitulating with Hakeem Jeffries to lurch the country to the left. No, there's no legislation in this. No. This is purely the policy of some bureaucrats that, albeit are picked and work at the pleasure of the president. And this is another of the cabinet-level presidential knights of the round table, if you will, complete with courts of their own. And I run a great personal risk because currently they have a folder with my name on it, sitting there saying, I wonder if this Joe Thomas that's co-owner of this radio station with Elaine Thomas was the same jackass that was on the interwebs hawking on about net neutrality. Doesn't he understand the word neutrality is in the legislation? How could it be bad? Why would conservatives be against that? Because it is the government's ability to throttle and control your internet speeds. And what it will do, as it had done before, is actually throttle back many other people's things. And you say, well, but Joe, what about Netflix? What about, and a lot of it is driven by entertainment. I will not argue. But if you want something, shouldn't you be able to purchase it? If something has value to you, shouldn't you be able to purchase it? And if something doesn't have value, why would you purchase it? As the noted American and Australian philosopher Angus Young once said, what do you do for money, honey? How do you get your kicks? I say this because the internet is supplanted Main Street in many ways. So what happens when the government restricts your customers' ability to get to your store, air quotes? What happens when the government starts to decide, maybe now isn't a good time to have the internet working? Because this also establishes that federal authority over internet in general. Remember during the Arab Spring, do you remember the Arab Spring? Hosni Mubarak, no great scion of personal liberty and God-given rights, but he was our ally, was facing an uprising. The Islamic Brotherhood was, the Muslim Brotherhood, pardon me, was rising up in what they called the Arab Spring, because his police state had started to treat too many people too badly. And so people started to notice, and then they started to march. And during it, Hosni Mubarak, in an attempt to protect his sorry carcass, shut off the internet in Egypt. To which our president at the time, Barack Obama, Barry Soetoro to his closer friends, President Obama said wistfully to the White House press corps, "Boy, wouldn't that be a great thing to have here?" And funny enough, not long after that, net neutrality started to be flounced about. It was quiet because everyone was talking about Obamacare. Net neutrality is just Obamacare for the internet. Only in this case, we don't need to have a repeal and replace vote. We just need a new president who will come in and say, yeah, here are my FCC commissioners, and get rid of that. You say, Joe, but isn't this the rich oligarchs? And see, that's the problem. That's the trap we fall into as we start talking about the rich guys. And you can't let the oligarchs have the things. You start using phrases like oligarchy, and you start thinking, well, that's something Vladimir Putin has. I will remind you that Volodymyr Zelensky also has an oligarchy. That King Charles of Britain has an oligarchy. We, up until the beginnings of the Great Society, saw this amazing churn. If you go back 60 years and look at who the richest Americans were, and then compare it to the list of richest Americans in 2008, you will find that no one appears on the same list. Nobody who was amongst the richest Americans in 1964, by 2008, had fallen off the list of wealthiest Americans, and the people who were the wealthiest Americans were nowhere to be seen in 1964. This was the point of America, that you could jump from poor to middle class, from middle class to wealthy, and you could screw up pretty badly and slide back from wealthy to poor pretty quickly. See Jordan Belfort, my Bayside High School classmate. So you can screw up really badly. The idiot sons of the idiot sons were a business paradigm born in the free market of America, where the third or fourth generation running a family of business might not have the same zeal for the family business that great-grandpa did. And all of a sudden, like sands through your fingers, grains of sand through your fingers, there it goes. And now it's somebody else's wealth, because wealth doesn't go away. Wealth is governed almost economically by the same physical law of the conservation of matter. Wealth moves, wealth goes around and does things and creates other things. And what's interesting, though, with wealth is it can create new wealth. It depends on how you define wealth. And that's where we get back to net neutrality. Because the wealth of being able to have high-speed internet and the ability to do things over the internet, that's no good for the government. The government has nary enough control over it. And without bringing a bill to the floor, without having to get Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries into a room, some of the president's knights of the realm have now ordered that we have now this great internet society.
This is the Racing Wire Minute with Brian Belansky.
400 miles at the Monster Mile. That story next.
The Racing Wire Minute is presented by
She can stand, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can stand.
Learn more at She Can STEM. A message brought to you by the Ad Council.
NASCAR is heading to one of the best short tracks on the circuit, the Monster Mile, Dover International Speedway. One driver who won't be in the car, Eric Jones. He fractured a vertebrae in Sunday's wreck at Talladega. Corey Heim will be in the number 43 Camry. There's no timetable for Jones' return. The short track package has been a hot topic of conversation this year. It's something NASCAR is working on, and it's unclear how the package will work on the Dover concrete. One thing is certain, pit lane at Dover is flat out bonkers, and the race could be decided on pit road. The green flag flies at 2 p.m. Eastern Sunday on FS1.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Are buried under unbridled growth. For in your time, we have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society. Yes, on abundance and liberty for all. It demands an end to poverty and racial injustice,
Who could be against
to
it?
which we're totally committed in our time.
So the president and his Great Society speech, again at a commencement address for the University of Michigan, is seminally exactly where we find ourselves. And you say, Joe, what could be against, how could you be against eliminating poverty? Because it's not the government's job, unless, and this is where the courtroom attorney needs to come out in all of us, unless the government is admitting that poverty is their doing. And that's the problem in this conceit. See, first, Lyndon Johnson had to convince the Democrats in Washington that they needed to tacitly accept that poverty was their fault, and therefore then they could accept that they were going to fix it. And the best part is they could always point to a previous Congress or two and say it was really their fault, and we're going to fix it. And so when net neutrality comes along, you're like, but Joe, but I'm poor. Joe, I can't afford gig speed internet. University tuitions, pharmaceutical costs, electric car prices. These are all things, whether you're Karnak the Magnificent or not, you will know that once they're subsidized, the cost goes up exponentially, the raw cost. Of course, if you get a subsidy, then you say, well, I got a subsidy, so it's not really the cost. Yeah, it is still. As our friend Chris Horner is wont to say, taxing Peter to pay Paul will always have Paul's undying support until Peter runs out of money, and then you have to tax Peter and Paul's kids and then grandkids to pay them both off. And that's where we are as a country right now. But we're doing payoffs as well under these pandering populist programs, and this ties in. We were talking about this last night at the 7th Congressional District Forum that the King George Tea Party, by the way, what a great irony in that, the King George Tea Party. I mean, it's the perfect name. It's King George County, obviously, in Virginia. at the forum they were having, we were talking about the capital gains proposal by the president, in excess of 44%, higher than it's been in 100 years. Again, this is populism. This is vote for me in November because I'm going to go get the bad guys. Me and Gavin, Kamala, my vice president. I used to think that Joe Biden would perhaps have a surprise at the convention. And I was talking to somebody who knows a little bit about the way these conventions work. He says it's really, it would be a Molotov cocktail into the Democratic Party if he was to announce that he was stepping back after winning all these delegates in the primaries and was conceding his delegates to Gavin Newsom. However, they said it would not be wholly unlikely, and as a matter of fact, fairly commonplace in the world of politics, to announce a different vice president for the second term. So stay tuned. That'll be August in Chicago, because when the Democrats convene in Chicago, good things always ensue. But the pandering populism continues, and this net neutrality thing is just another thing. But they say it with the glib grandeur of somebody who's just saying, "The sun came up this morning. We have net neutrality." It's said with the same forethought. Meanwhile, what it creates is another federal bureaucracy under which you must get permission to do many things, because you're also getting subsidies to do many things without, per se, costs to you. So that's what you have to realize, that this is, without question, just more of this. This is the great internet society, and done without any legislation. Jonathan Emord was talking about this yesterday, a bill that Ron Paul proposed many times over, written by Jonathan Emord, one of our Senate candidates, that would require every regulation to be tied to a legislation, that there could be no enforcement of any regulation from the federal bureaucracy without specific regulation giving that power to the regulatory body. And you say, well, Joe, that would take forever. The entire Congress would bog down. How many of us would argue that Congress doing a little bit less wouldn't be a bad thing, huh? It's not like they do a lot right now anyway, but what they do is horrific. And that brings me to a subtext to our 7th Congressional District Forum. I live in Fluvanna County. Drove to King George County last night, and you might want to file this program under the banner "Fake it till you make it," because I didn't hit the rack last night until nigh about 11:30, and I was up at 3:30 to get prepared to hang out with you this morning. At the 3:30 is a regular. Normally, I'm in bed between 8:30 and 9 o'clock at night, because I like to, believe it or not, get a reasonable night's sleep in between these early hours. But I didn't get back until very late because the event, the forum, didn't end until 9:15 or so. And then there was lots of talking with folks, and they were gracious, wonderful people. And there is a live stream up on their YouTube channel. If you saw my Facebook post about the forum coming up, if you go to that link, you'll still be able to get to the video. We're going to play some highlights from it coming up a little while. But if you look at a map, understand that Fluvanna County is not part of the 7th Congressional District. But I believe parts of Louisa are, and then certainly as you head north, Greene County is, Madison County is, and you head on over all the way from Greene County to King George County. And 2 hours after I left my home in Palmyra, I arrived at the wonderful church where we held this event. And I was thinking to myself, Self, I said, it's a really big congressional district, isn't it? Because I could have driven due north and gotten actually into the congressional district up in Orange and then headed across. I did the circuitous route. I did the interstates just because I wanted to go fast. Don't judge. So let's spend a moment on the size of these congressional districts. And Jonathan Emord's point that we should have specific legislation that goes along with all the regulation. How would you do that? How could you do that? I have a simple proposal. And it goes into something I talked about with many of the folks after the forum, which is the remaking of this country after the Civil War. After the Civil War, the demagoguery went crazy and people like Woodrow Wilson rose to power. I know I should be careful with it. We are buying a radio station in Stanton. We're supposed to love Woody Wilson. No. Not so much. The technocrat movement led and perhaps most notably championed by Woodrow Wilson was the idea that centralized autocrats should be the deciders. And if you read Marx, you understand that that's what he wanted too. That's what his beliefs were, that a centralized deciding power, a bureau of political types or a politburo would be the best way to organize a society. And so after the Civil War, there were a lot of people who said, oh my God, this was horrible. We need to make sure this never happens again. So they started to set about amending the Constitution in many ways, and in some cases never even bothering to amend the Constitution, just changing it with a law. And one of those laws was a law that capped the size of the U.S. House of Representatives. See, up until the early 1900s, as we had more people, we would wind up with more congressional representatives. In the early 20th century, they had to build 2 new rooms on the U.S. Capitol. They really only needed 1 new room for the U.S. House of Representatives to meet in. It's the one they currently meet in. And if you've ever been to the U.S. Capitol, with permission, obviously, of a member of the House or Senate, you wouldn't want to be in there without their permission. You could spend years in jail waiting to get a hearing. But if you've ever been in the U.S. Capitol with permission, you know you have their statuary halls on either side of the rotunda before you get into the House and Senate chambers. Those used to be the House and Senate chambers. The House of Representatives, because the country had been growing so much, had outgrown that little area, so they built a big new wing onto both sides of the Capitol so it looked nice. And they told everyone, well, boy, that was really expensive. And we really don't want to have to do that again. So they said, that's it. We've got a room that's big enough for 435 people. That's it. No more representatives. And they passed a law that said that. I'm sure it was bipartisan, too. And what you then immediately started doing was concentrating the amount of power and authority each of these congressional representatives had. It also became blood sport every 10 years when the constitutionally mandated census would go and happen that, oh my gosh, who's getting the Congress people? And I've lost Congress people, and they've gained Congress people, and this state's more powerful. Electoral college votes and all of these things, great googly moogly. And I spoke about this at some length with folks. The secret to me, one of the things we need to get back to is proportional representatives, because absent even all the multitudes who have snuck across our southern border, our population has more than tripled in the last 100 years, yet the number of representatives we have is not. And that's why it takes 2 hours to drive from one side of a congressional district in Virginia to another. and why one person is asked to represent 800,000 people.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning with apologies to those who might have a weak constitution, lowercase c. This next segment, as we led into it with our statements on the size of Congress, is to be called Engaging in Congress. Yes, I mean, yes, the Kama Sutra has their own definition for what engaging in Congress means. But these days, the two types of Congress you might be engaging in kind of feel the same, don't they? So we left off talking about the size of the U.S. House of Representatives and shrinkage, Jerry, there's been shrinkage. That the number of representatives is not kept up with the number of citizens, just citizens, never mind all the ones who are here illegally in the country. And you say, but gosh, Joe, you're talking about a Congress of 1,200 people. Yeah. And then you could have laws like Jonathan's that say every regulation must come with legislation. And if you can't get legislation, you can't have the regulation. You say, but God, that's bigger government. I thought conservatives were for smaller government. See, this is where we get hung up on our bumper stickers. Conservatives are for representative government. And I've railed at even using the word conservative anymore because I like to think of myself as a restorative. And people say, well, my gosh, Joe, nothing would ever get done. And this is a bad thing, how? It seems that a growing number of people realize the less government does, the more liberty we have, the more we can do. But there are examples of big legislative bodies all across the country. New England is replete with legislative representative bodies that have much lower per capita. I mean, I think there's 1,300 members of the New Hampshire General Assembly. Schools get funded, police get paid, roads get paved. So apparently, even with a low per capita number, smaller per capita number for each representative, you can still get the basics done. But this came up during the forum last night, the power of the unelected bureaucracy. One of the candidates, John Ryan, was talking about term limits. Coming up in a little while, we'll get some video from it. I'm going to start with the end because we had one question for everybody, and it had to do with the Freedom Caucus. So we asked all the candidates about the Freedom Caucus, MTV, motion to vacate. Although we might have asked them about, Duff and Kennedy and all the VJs that have wandered into the ether since the glory days of I want my MTV. Please don't let me ever do that again. Just on behalf of the nice folks. All right. So, you say, Joe, 1,200 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, that couldn't possibly be good. Well, I'd like to couple that with a Senate that's actually tasked with going back to the states and getting the money to fund the government. What do you mean? Prior to the 16th Amendment, that's how the U.S. government got its money. You want to start a maelstrom of things? Say, certainly the Civil War was fought over who was a slave state and who wasn't a slave state. But what really pissed off the U.S. government was when all those states seceded and their tax money disappeared with it. Because I've seen different estimates, but certainly in excess of 50% is a reasonable estimation. In excess of 50%, I've heard it could have been as high as 2/3 of the U.S. government's tax revenue disappeared when the southern states seceded, because they were prosperous and paid a lot of taxes, because that's how the U.S. government got its taxes. The senators, this is how the process works, the House passes budget bills, spending bills, and then sends them to the Senate. And then the Senate determines, well, I don't know, can we go back to our states and say this is what we owe? And that would be their job, was to go back to the governors and the assemblies of their various states and say, all right, here's our cut. Here's how much we owe the government. And you say, well, that's a weird way to do it. The intent was that the several states would be in charge of the federal government. So the Senate having final say on the budget was not because Mark Warner or Tim Kaine became some sort of super legislator. That's another thing we did after the Civil War. Their job was to represent the taxpayers of the several states as they came back to the governor and said, yeah, okay, here's what we need, and we need to bring it to the, this is our membership dues, if you want to call it that. So all of these things slowly created this populist, centralized government that guys like George Mason were absolutely gobsmackingly afraid of. And I'll finish up on this, because after the forum was over, as I said, I got home very late. But part of it was self-inflicted. I was talking with lots of folks who were there in attendance. And I know in the Charlottesville area, it's been an uphill battle to convince people regarding the Article 5 Convention of States. King George County, fired up for it. I never even brought it up. It was brought up to me by several people because they hadn't been listeners to the program. Like, really, you are? Almost man, woman, and child were all part of the Convention of States movement, fired up in the Fred Vegas area. Fired up for the Convention of States, the Article 5 convention that had several attempts prior to the Civil War of being convened. Imagine never mind the bloodshed and the lives lost that didn't necessarily need to be lost if we had been able to muster enough courage to take power back even prior to the Civil War. But then after the Civil War, under the specter of the Civil War, well, you must give the centralized government more power. Look at what happened. Look at the lives lost. So under that premise, more centralized power was taken. We're going to jump to some of the video from last night. We're going to jump to the end when I asked all the 6 participants the same question, to tell us their opinion of the Freedom Caucus.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning, and thank you for letting us do what we do here, and all the folks who download and listen both in live broadcast and very much like Star Trek, the original series, where we seem to have far more viewers in rerun than we do in live action. So under the banner Engaging in Congress, last night I got to host, as I said, this, moderate this forum, and they had asked their members if anyone had any questions, and much like the dance floor at a wedding, until somebody started asking questions, then everybody wanted to ask questions. I got a stack of papers brought to me by the organizers as the forum went on with questions, and almost all of them were about, in varying senses, the House Freedom Caucus, rhinos, Speaker Johnson, and their behavior towards the Freedom Caucus and or the legislative agendas and what's Mike Johnson doing and that kind of thing. So I was already planning on asking that question at the end, but it seemed like the Vox Populi was on my side as well, that they wanted this question. So while you at first blush might say, Joe, this is just cheap radio, why didn't you ask them if they would all support the eventual nominee too? This was after talking to all of them, and again, you can go to my Facebook page, Seville Joe Thomas, or the WTON Facebook page, and you'll find the link to this video in the promotional announcement that I made. If you follow the same, where I said, coming up tonight, we'll be hosting this event. If you find that post on my Facebook page, just follow the link. It'll take you right to the archives of the event last night in King George County. But this is the 6 participants for the 7th Congressional District GOP nomination when asked MTV, motion to vacate, the House Freedom Caucus, and the Speaker of the House discuss. And it starts, and by the way, we are going alphabetical with Derek Anderson.
Hey, we'll talk motion to vacate first. No, I think right now, and what we're dealing with across the world right now, this is not the time that we be playing games in Washington, D.C. Folks, let's think about just a few months ago, on October 7th, Israel had one of the most heinous acts done to them. They had hundreds of people taken hostage, raped, brutally murdered, drugged through the streets of Gaza. Whether or not you like the Speaker of the House, but for a month straight, we played games in Washington, D.C. For over a month, we were not getting things accomplished in Washington, D.C. Let's just be honest. We saw a whole bunch of politicians jump in front of TVs, and they jumped all over the place. And that's what we did. Now, we have Iran that fired 300 plus missiles over to Israel. Thank goodness we had some good allies in the Middle East that were going after those rockets that only a few impacted. And again, we're playing games in Washington, D.C. Rather than taking the time to go get legislation passed to protect our border, to try to get our economy back on track, people in D.C. continue to play games. The Speaker of the House, one of the other questions. Yesterday, I believe, the Speaker of the House went to Columbia University and stood in front of a whole bunch of pro-Hamas protesters and looked them in the eye and told them that they needed to stop doing what they were doing. Had several Republican members alongside them. Folks, We're not in a place to be playing games right now. We see what's going on in our schools. We see what's going on in our universities. Whether or not, we're not even sure if some of those people that are at these universities are actually students at the universities right now. So to see some of our Republican Party leaders go and stand up at those universities and look these protesters in the eye that are supporting a terrorist organization, I think that takes guts. Whether or not you agree with everything and all the policies that are going on right now, it takes guts to sit in front of hundreds of people that are screaming at you and going after our Israeli community, whether it be the Jewish community or the country of Israel itself. It's time that we start stepping up and doing things. For the Freedom Caucus, and I don't know how much time left. Look, folks.
He said
I don't-
60.
What's that, Joe?
He's under 60.
All right, he's under 60. Look, here's where I'm at with the Freedom Caucus. I've got people from the Freedom Caucus that are supporting me. I've got Freedom Caucus people that are against me. At the end of the day, and I'm looking at one of the moms that I went to high school with her son. I don't know about you, Mrs. Sheets, but I know my mom, and I'm sure you might have not done that. You might have done this with Brandon and them. My mom did not let me join groups and let me join clubs without getting good grades first. I don't want to be going into Congress telling everyone I'm going to join that club, that club, that club, and that club before I've even gone to Congress and got anything done. So when I get into Congress, my goal is to do things that help the 7th Congressional District, not join clubs. So that's it. Thank you.
Next up, alphabetically, Cameron Hamilton. See, it's been so long, I forgot what order we were going in.
It's been so long, my legs are asleep.
Good thing it's not a dance competition.
Well, yeah, my wife can attest to that. That would not be going in my favor. So, a lot to cover here.
Motion to vacate, Freedom Caucus, Speaker of the House. Go.
Yes, sir. So I had a lengthy conversation with Congressman Bob Good about when, again, Mike Johnson became the new speaker. There were a lot of folks that were very moved by his testimony and by his faith and his proclamation and prayer over the actual floor of the House of Representatives. It's a powerful statement. The imagery we saw was very invoking. Since then, I've become concerned with some of Mike Johnson's leadership. Now, whether or not I support a motion to vacate, I don't know that I've met that threshold yet. So I don't think that the motion to vacate is appropriate. Having said that, there are legitimate criticisms that can be made over some of the legislative actions that have occurred. We've had more frustration over a lack of securing the southern border because we're prioritizing sending money overseas. Matthew 7, right? You're going to rebuke your brother for the stick in his own eye, not for the log in yours. We have serious and egregious problems here in the United States, and I wish our congressional leadership would have fought more for the southern border, fought more to give clean water to Flint, Michigan, for all I care, than to send billions and billions of borrowed dollars overseas. So this is my exceedingly frustrated concern over a lack of priority. Where does the America First policy come about? I thought we elected them to work for us, not for other people. So I do have concerns. Again, I believe Mike Johnson is a good and honorable man. My frustration is I believe he's listening to all of the wrong advisors right now. And I think we're seeing a continuation of policies under Kevin McCarthy, which many people took issue with, reasonably so. Now, I am endorsed by the House Freedom Fund. I am a Freedom Caucus candidate. I do fully plan to join the Freedom Caucus if given the honor to represent you in Congress. But again, the Freedom Caucus is a very diverse, it is not a monolithic group. There are many different perspectives and ideals and debates that happen behind closed sessions. I know because I've heard some of them. There's a broad range of perspectives and ideals that they fight over. But again, it would be my absolute honor. I've received endorsements from some of the great Freedom Caucus advocates who stood against our own party, and I employ the Freedom Caucus for their willingness to do so. So when it comes to future deliberations, I believe firmly that you will also be malleable based upon the company you keep. I'm seeking to work for you and to represent you, but I also want to keep strong company of actual fighting conservatives in D.C. who will be an additional layer of support and ensuring I am accountable for the words and the promises that I've run on. So that's why I want to join caucuses like that. I want to be a part of the fighting cohort of our congressional body who are willing to stand firmly for America First principles.
Many years ago, I administered a 7-person primary amongst Republicans in the 5th Congressional District, and we would have them on the radio every morning. And somebody said, well, what if they all give the same answer? I said, well, that's perfectly legitimate. So everyone, if you hear somebody say the same thing, don't hold it against them. Many people will have the same ideas. Maria, thank you again. The question, Maria Martin, the motion to vacate, the Freedom Caucus especially, and Speaker of the House, where do you stand on these controversial issues?
I believe that if we, right now, what we have, the situation that we have, with most grown-ups that turn to be politicians and then they go and govern in any level, local, state, or federal, becomes politician, and they are not anymore serving the country. They are even serving their political party, or they are doing their own little agenda because somebody is doing something for them, maybe a little trip to Europe or whatever. So something that we should do, because it won't take very much to try to clean a river that you have to clean a river every day. You know, it's running every day, and then you find in this little corner of the river, you find some trash. Every day, you have to clean this trash. What we need is to fix the beginning. If we need to have hope for our country, is to bring God back to school. So when children grow, the next generation grow, and they go to be in government, they will have some type of fear of God, and they are going to have some patriotism, which is not there anymore. When you start serving your little club, you call it the caucus, when you are serving your little club, your little friend, then you cannot work for the good of everybody, for the good of the people that has elected you. And anyone will make you change your mind. But when you are focused and to serve the country that has given you everything, then there won't be much people that will come and make you change your mind. What was it, the next one?
So you were talking about the Freedom Caucus there. In abstract, their work with the motion to vacate, clearing the Speaker of the House, and the debate over whether that's still to come again.
It is a shame that people from the same party cannot make up their mind and say, okay, we are on the same side, and pull the rope to serve the people on the same side. Everyone is just doing their own thing. It's just a shame for the party. You know, we just have this new Speaker of the House. The other one, it was kicked off like, you must go. And now we have one that I thought it was pretty good, but now it's also time for him to go.
Thank you very much. Next up is John Myers. Freedom Caucus, motion to vacate, Speaker of the House.
Sure. So I don't idolize any members of Congress. I'll put that right out there. I don't idolize any of them. My idol's Jesus Christ. The people I admire are George Washington, Dwight Eisenhower, and Ronald Reagan, and there ain't no Eisenhowers up there in the House right now, okay? I'm one of the few people in this race that has chosen purposely not to affiliate myself with any caucuses in the House. It's not that I disagree with their ideals. I agree with the ideals of the Freedom Caucus. I don't agree with their methodologies, and I think they lack maturity. And I think what happened back with Speaker McCarthy should have been handled as it would have been handled 30 or 40 years ago. You know, when Reagan was president, and when we had what seemed like serious people in government, it should have been handled in the back room, not in front of the public. And that leads me to believe that a lot of members of these caucuses, in particular the Freedom Caucus, while I might agree with their ideals, are more concerned with doing it for the cameras and the Twitter policy arguments than they are with the good of the Republican Party and conservatives, because that was humiliating to conservatives. It took weeks, and all the Democrats have to do is sit back and enjoy the show and use it against us. I'm a serious person, okay, who's done serious things with my life for 30 years. I don't consider a lot of those people to be serious people. I think they lack maturity. I was with, we all have consultants, in case you don't know that. Everybody has consultants. My consultants were the same ones that helped Governor Youngkin get elected. And early on in the process, they said, John, you have to get up there and you got to define yourself by aligning yourself with a group. You got to get endorsements. One of the guys you're running against is definitely the establishment guy. You should be the Freedom Caucus guy. Go meet with the people up there. And I said, that's not really me, though. I don't identify with those people. And they were like, well, you got to do that to win. And I said, well, with all due respect, I'd rather win with honor than do what I had to do, no matter what it was, to win. But anyways, I had some meetings on the Hill. I didn't like the way they went. There's an exchange of assurances when you're trying to align yourself with caucuses or endorsements, and I didn't feel comfortable with it, so I didn't go that direction. So I think with the motion to vacate, again, like I said, I think that kind of inter-party business needs to be handled maturely behind closed doors.
Thank you very much. Next up, John Probodos.
Yes, sir. You're getting good at it.
It's 3 for 3.
Listen, I have a history of bringing people together. From the beginning, the Catholics, about 30, 40 years ago, I think we all remember, the Catholics and Protestants won't talk to each other, the Baptists and the Episcopalians won't talk to each other. Now, we created an organization where we brought all these different denominations under one roof. And we were very successful with that. 30-some years, until last December, I decided to run for office. I was chairing the board of that organization. Now, the way our Congress is working, I don't like it. The fundamental reason is that everybody has got themselves painted to a corner. And the voting is by party line. And that's not the way the government should run. I mean, it started some time back with the health care bill, Obamacare bill. And it was a party line vote. And before that, there were a few instances. But from that point on, it is really getting ugly. We need to be able to talk to each other. We need to be able to put American people's interest in front than party politics are. And what I see with Freedom Caucus or any caucus, it is becoming a shell for people to get together and talk to each other and get excited. And that really is not helping the country's agenda. Now, Speaker Johnson is a great man. I actually hoped that he would do much better with this Ukraine bill. When he said he was not going to take it up after the Senate passed. By the way, I was not endorsed by Speaker Johnson. In fact, I'm not asking anyone's endorsement. Like John Meyer said, you want an establishment candidate, you have it. I'm not the establishment candidate. If I'm going to get an endorsement from a person like Speaker Johnson, and when it's time to get a vote, guess who's going to call me? I want to vote the way you want to vote a bill, not what the Speaker wants to vote on any bills. So one of the arguments that I see that the Speaker had used, that a lot of us here are Army people, right? We have a lot of munition, old munition, sitting here. We need to get rid of it so we can make better ones. That's fine. We'll give it to some other people, let them use it. But let them pay for it before we give it to them. That's my point. And that's where I'm very disappointed with the Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
And you're listening
And last
to, and we're going to pause here for a moment for the cause, as they say in the broadcast world. The last member of the six candidate forum last night on the subject of the motion to vacate the Speaker of the House and, most importantly, the House Freedom Caucus. We'll get their final answers in a moment.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
It is Joe Thomas in the morning, but you knew that because you surfed to this channel, and I appreciate everyone who tunes in and spends some time with us, either now in the live broadcast, podcast, I guess, narrowcast world, or in abstract later on in reruns, as we Trekkies like to say. So yesterday, I got the opportunity and the honor, really, to moderate this forum, and we were finishing up. If you're joining us in progress, I apologize. But you should have been up at 6. We were playing the answer to the final question, which was the same to all of the candidates, their position on the House Freedom Caucus, the motion to vacate debate, and the Speaker of the House. And we've gotten 5 of the 6. We've heard from 5 of the 6. So let's get the last one in here, and then we can move on to other things.
Up, Terrace Todd.
Come back down here. You can tell
The walk down the steps won't count against your time.
Hey, it can. This won't take long. No, in all honesty, again, I genuinely love and care about people, so I like being closer to you guys. Truthfully, so you said
Freedom Caucus, motion to vacate,
yeah.
House Speaker.
I mentioned this before, and more as we see Congress and stuff like that going on, and what we have are children in the marketplace. While you and I and others in this country are standing in the soup line, they didn't miss a paycheck. And that's what we have. I mean, we have people that are there that are constantly playing games with the American people. So again, my fight is on behalf of you and your family. That's what this campaign is really all about. I would rather, me personally, have you on speed dial than some of these folks in Washington. Because Washington is extremely compromised because, again, lots of money, bureaucrats, and all these people are passing money around, buying people, buying politicians, to be honest with you. And so, again, I don't think I would have been at that point where, again, with the Speaker, as was mentioned before, I would not have been at that point. I do believe in taking care of stuff behind closed doors first, and then go from that point. But for the most part, these are the games that they're playing. And so, in the words of Frederick Douglass, this is what I kind of live my life by. I will unite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong. It's just that simple to me. And so what we're having in Washington is we have a lot of cliques, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't join some of the other, fraternities and stuff like that, because it's like, why would I mean, I don't need that in my life. And so I see these as kind of like, groups, they're cliques, and you got over here this, you got the squad over here, and they getting all the press time and the camera time. So I'm not really about that. I'm really about doing your business on behalf of you all as your next congressman. And so, again, I agree with some of the things that they do, but not 100%. And some things that, that others may do as well. But sometimes what happens in Washington, whoever's in the majority, they get the right to decide what legislation actually comes forward. Sometimes that legislation might be a great idea on our behalf to make you and your family's lives a lot better, but because I'm in the majority, then I can block that so that way you don't get the credit. See, that's child's play to me. Instead of just doing it on a bipartisan standpoint and making it, so that way we all can at least get the hand clap that people are looking for and make sure that it's, improving the quality of our life, then that's what I'm really all about. So I don't like playing these games. I think we're too far ahead, we're too far gone in this country to actually continue to keep playing these games about this side, that side, and then the internal fighting. I don't really support that and endorse that. So as your congressman, again, I believe in bringing people together for the common good and on behalf of you and your family. So God bless you. I thank you for the time to speak.
Let's hear it for all of the candidates here.
And that is, of course, me at the end of the candidates forum yesterday at the King George County Tea Party and their candidate forum yesterday for Virginia 7th District candidates. And like I said, I was struck as I was driving up there how big the 7th District is. And I have friends in Albemarle County. Albemarle County has a small little bit of the 7th Congressional District in there. So you say, well, how could you go all the way from this little top corner of Albemarle County all the way to King George County, all the way up in the northern neck agricultural area or horticultural area, whatever it is. That's a massive district to try to cover, and it was point and parcel of what I was getting at when I said that these districts have become way too big in and of themselves in abstract. But I wanted their thoughts on it, and a couple of folks said, well, why didn't you push back? It's not a debate between me and them. You know how I stand on things, and perhaps they agree with me, and perhaps they don't agree with me, or you. But if you live in the 7th Congressional District, it is important. And there were a lot of other important things discussed. And a reminder that if you want to watch the entire thing, including a little bit about each candidate, where they come from, their background, you can look it up on my Facebook page, either the WTON Radio Facebook page or my Seville Joe Thomas Facebook page, and follow the link that I posted last night before the event. There was I guess it was about 6:45 or so last night. I posted a Facebook link and a Twitter link saying, hey, coming up, and you can watch it on this YouTube channel, the King George County Tea Party YouTube channel there, 434-882-4217. Lots of other things to get into, but one of the things that did come up is this convention of states, and I discovered that the attendees were fired up members of the local convention of states project, and that was really heartening, and they were all surprised. They had probably never listened to the radio program. I think one person came up and said they had listened to me on the radio before. And if you'd only listened once, there's a pretty good chance you may never have heard me mention my support for the Convention of States, the Article 5, conventionofstates.com/Virginia, and you find out the events coming up and bi-monthly meetings. Like in Charlottesville, they meet twice a month. Yes, First Free Coffee Bar and at Sam's Kitchen. Both opportunities for you to convene with Nancy Koenig and the folks from the Convention of States. But one of the things that we're talking about is it is still heartening to know that all these things are still there, that all the efforts of all the Lyndon Johnson acolytes have not taken out these substantive planks in our daily lives. However, and I'm going to bring this up because it was emailed to me that George Soros has weighed in on the Convention of States. So you know it's getting real when, where did the email go? It actually came from Nancy Koenig, and there it is. So George Soros wrote this to supporters as a fundraising email regarding the Convention of States, the Article 5 Convention. This is, again, quoting George Soros. I am writing you again today because I'm honestly worried at the sheer number of states introducing new bills and how desperately lawmakers are rushing these bills through state legislatures. We've barely made it into 2024, and we've already seen nearly 100 bills for Article 5. This is painting a frightening picture of what we can expect from the rest of this year. And all of these bills are moving through the state legislatures fast, with multiple states holding votes every week. George Soros fundraising in order to stop the Convention of States movement amongst the several states. So, there's guilt by association. Sometimes knowing somebody is best suited by who's opposing them. And when George Soros is ardently opposing the Convention of States movement, I don't want to say you gain gravity because of it, because he has lots of money and he has lots of minions. And I will guarantee you that if that email went out in the last few days, you will see within the next week or two mainstream, nationally supported news articles, both in print and in broadcast, denigrating the Convention of States movement, connecting it to racism. I will guarantee they will be, because there were, and we're honest about this stuff, there were attempts to convene a Convention of States in several different ways prior to the Civil War. We don't have a lot of details, but they will presume certainly that some of them were on behalf of the southern states. And if they were, again, this is where the process becomes important. If, let's say, South Carolina, as they did during the Continental Congress that wrote the Declaration of, or approved the Declaration of Independence, objected to something or wanted to elevate slavery to a constitutional right, as Abraham Lincoln actually suggested, he would sign law that would elevate slavery. He would support the idea of a constitutional amendment that would codify slavery as part of the Bill of Rights. Can you imagine? But they will, and I'm guaranteeing this, with George Soros's money, there will be news articles written about how the Convention of States is racist. They will use images. You might even see my head in some of those images because I was there broadcasting live from the riots of Charlottesville. They'll bring up the specter of Charlottesville. They might even get Joe Biden's opening statement of his 2020 presidential run. Charlottesville. It's the first word he spoke in his presidential announcement. Charlottesville. They will bring out the specters of the Unite the Right, David Duke reunion party that it was, and say, look, these are the Convention of States adherents. They might even pull up pictures. I know that advertisers of my old radio show used to get hit with pictures of me broadcasting the news of this riot in Charlottesville and saying, no, he's not broadcasting, he's a participant. Just like they're doing with people who are in and around the Capitol on January 6th, all seeking to dismiss your discussions. But I'm warning you now, that's what's coming for the Convention of States. So if you're on the fence, understand that now it's about to get real. They were concerned. George Soros is mobilized. And I will guarantee you that within 2 weeks, I mean, it takes a little while to get, 60 Minutes or, Face the Nation or anything like that. You'll get some Civil War historian on the set of Meet the Depressed or George Snuffleupagus will ask them, so, is the Convention of States racist? Greg reminds us of what we called August 11th, 2017, Citronella Nacht. And it's called that mainly because, just like Kristallnacht, it has been used as the Civil War was used, and the knights in white satin have been used since they first burned their first cross, as a presumption for more federal and centralized power.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Thomas, good morning. Thank you for joining in, letting us do our due for you here on Rumble and YouTube, coming soon as the FCC says okay. I mean, they're busy right now, busy doing net neutrality for everyone so that we can all have equally bad internet service. Once that happens, you'll be able to get the broadcast version again, hopefully coming soon to a radio back in Charlottesville as well. Joining us to open his sports reporter's notebook on a Friday morning, you must not have had enough pages with all the stuff going on between playoffs and drafts and stuff. He is Mac McDonald. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing good, Joe. Yeah, there was a lot going on last night, and I was giggling because you said the FCC. The FCC is probably looking at us. We probably have a combined 100 years of radio time, right? And they're going, "What are we still dealing with these guys?" So
won't they just go away like other old guys?
Yeah, I can happily say no FCC fines in the first 50 years of, my career, whatever. So NFL draft history made last night. 5 quarterbacks selected in the top 10, 6 went in the top 12, and Kirk Cousins was on the phone during the draft going, "The Falcons are doing what?" Anyway, as expected, Caleb Williams became a Chicago Bear. The Commanders went with Jaden Daniels of LSU at number 2. And then Carolina quarterback Drake May became the 3rd overall selection by the Patriots. We'll get to more of that in a moment. But the Falcons surprised the football world and chose Washington's quarterback Michael Penix at number 8. Now, Kirk Cousins just signed a 4-year, $180 million deal, right? And he got word from his agent while Atlanta was on the clock. Now, apparently they had visited a little bit, but the Falcons brass admitted, it's never a good time to tell an older quarterback we're going with a younger guy for right now, at least drafting. Falcons GM Terry Fontenot said Cousins' reaction will remain private. Oh, yeah, no kidding. 7 receivers also went in the first round. There were 5 trades made on day 1 as well. Now, back to Drake May, the 3rd quarterback picked by New England in the modern draft era in the first round. Drew Bledsoe and Jim Plunkett were number 1 draft choices. Anyway, the history and the franchise mentality impressed the soon-to-be 22-year-old.
not only the history on the wall, but, kind of just the motto there, work ethic, grind it out. The Patriots has been a dynasty. I'm not going to be Tom Brady, so I'm just going to try to be Drake May. And from there, I'm just trying to learn from him, hopefully get to know him a little bit. And other than that, just try to, soak it up and be a sponge and try to learn all I can from him. And he's the man in that town.
Yeah, he'd probably be. He probably should try to beat Tom Brady. At Carolina, May started 26 games. He threw for 8,000 yards. He was a redshirt sophomore and declared early for the draft. 69 TDs, just 16 picks. His numbers at Carolina were so impressive that he thought, and the family thought, and the agents thought that this would be a good time for him to go. Another interesting thing last night with the Ravens, they selected at number 30. Defensive back Nate Wiggins from Clemson. Tiger coach Dabo Swinney was texting the Baltimore staff saying, "Hey, Nate's still on the board. Will you draft this guy, please?" Was one of the drafts he sent to the Ravens last night. 23 offensive players tabbed in the first round. The first defensive player, Laiatu Latu, didn't go until number 15 by the Colts. He is an edge rusher. And, pretty salty. So that's the way that shaped up. All right, Virginia baseball coach Brian O'Connor admitted the Boston College game at Fenway was special, but his team didn't play well. He wasn't happy. UVA lost to BC in the opening game of the weekend. It was 8-2. The Cavs only had 6 hits in the 12th annual ALS awareness game. BC never trailed, led 4-0 through 6. The Wahoos didn't score until the 8th inning, and here was the reaction from skipper Brian O'Connor.
It's disappointing. This is about a series. It's not about just this one game. We feel very honored to be a part of it because of what the game's about. That's critically important. Boston College has worked very hard to draw a lot of attention to ALS and raising money for it and raising awareness. And so we were honored to be part of the game, but just completely got outplayed.
So refreshing to have a post-game interview without a lawnmower, right in the infield where Brian does all this. Game 2 today, 3:00 at BC's campus of the series. So in the NBA last night, crazy. The Nuggets win. They beat the Lakers 112-105. Game 3, Denver now leads 3-love in the West first round. Sixers got the Knicks 125-114. New York leads that series 2-1, but the 76ers and Joel Embiid, who had 50, the third 76er to ever score 50 in a playoff. And so, Joe, last night he had what was it? The technical foul, a big technical foul in the first, and he also admitted to the writers afterwards that he's got Bell's palsy, and that part of his face is not feeling correct. He's not feeling good. But anyway, he had 50. Jalen Brunson had 39 in the losing effort. And then the Magic took care of the Cavs 121-83. Cleveland still leads that series 2-1. So the way that's shaping up. So yeah, it should be a fairly good weekend. And here locally, the Orlando Magic, they haven't done anything in quite some time. So this is it's a big time for them as well. And go ahead.
Well, the NBA playoffs seem like, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's dueling blowouts. It's like
yeah,
I
right
win by 20, you win by 20. Where are the games?
I'm down 30. We're down 30.
Is it just because it's the opening rounds and it's the 1 seed versus the 8 seed or whatever it is, and the games will become a little bit more competitive as it goes along?
It is, and and the Celtics should have never lost, and now the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be without Giannis, and so there's a lot of day to day. I think that's the best way to put it. I think there's a lot of day-to-day stuff happening. So that's why we see, what we see. But Joel Embiid telling the writers last night, we're going to win the series.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't worry about it. The Sixers are going to take care of this series. NHL playoffs, Panthers 5-3 over the Lightning. And that was game 3. Florida leads that series 3-love. And then the Hurricanes got the Islanders 3-2 last night. Carolina leads that series 3-love as well. Heck of a save last night by the Hurricanes goalie. And I mean, a heck of a save because the game was almost ready to be tied by the Isles. But it was just a great save. But J.J. McCarthy, also another quarterback selected 10th overall by the Vikings. So as I said, it was just a quarterback-driven, offensive-driven draft last night in the NFL.
I asked you this yesterday a little bit as well. I mean, you look back to whatever it was, 83 with Marino and all these guys who were drafted.
Right.
And I know Drake May was talking about, well, I'm not going to be Tom Brady. 5th round draft pick. I mean, the history, and you mentioned Drew Bledsoe. I mean, he was the guy in New England who had to Brady was carrying the clipboard for him during the day. And how many of these guys, anecdotally, Mac, in your life, the guys who have come in 5th round, 4th round, 3rd round, and have had to bust it to get to sniffing a starting job, versus the guys who kind of come in with all the whoopla and whoop-de-doo. I mean, there's guys like Lamar in Baltimore, obviously, who are going to throw that curve off. But it seems to me, anyway, as a casual observer, the guys who have to work for it and don't come in with the whoop-de-doo that a first-round pick comes in with, generally are the ones who are going to win you the Super Bowls.
Yeah, this is why over the course of my life, all right, I never really, NFL people only love, they're so jacked about the draft. I really could care less until they bring him in and develop, like last night, the Commanders take, Jaden Daniels and his numbers. I mean, he threw for what? He rushed for 3,000. He threw for 12,000, the only player in FBS history, to do that. And it's like, okay, great. But show me in September where you are. I don't, and like the college, all the recruiting and the 4-star and the 5-star, and it just shows, Brady is 6th round draft choice. And, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevance, the last one drafted.
That's a great one right there.
And now he's pretty solid, right? So I never have been one of those guys to follow it, worry about it, think about it. My Raiders last night took Bowers, the tight end. Good selection. Okay, they got a couple quarterbacks, and this guy I see all the time downtown where we go hang out every once in a while in the sunshine, and he was he was talking about the draft last night and all this. So it just I don't get caught up in it. I don't get caught up. I don't worry about it. I don't follow it. I've got too many other things to worry about than the draft and who they're picking and whether it was good or bad. But the pundits, they'll be all over it today, and they'll be reading the analysis and is this the Commanders had trouble. Sam Howell threw a lot of picks, so now he's going to be pushed. And Jaden Daniels was pretty good, and that's the way the quarterback position is being transitioned to. That the more athletic guy, the guy who can run, but the way. It was, and then Drake May is perfect for the Patriots fans. They're ecstatic that they're getting Drake May. I don't know how good Drake May is going to be.
Boston needs a lot to root for these days.
Well,
let me ask you. So this is the other shoe to fall. In the era of name, image, likeness, certainly the NFL is not going to lie. The NFL has done a masterful job of making sure that every month in the year there is something to discuss in the sports world about the NFL. They're brilliant about it, to make sure there's always some NFL news. Not for long. That's what it stands for, right?
Yeah.
There's no news. Not for long. But at some point, these drafts should be, I think, if we're going to allow for name, image, likeness, and kids to leave school to go and transfer portals and things like that, at what point does this draft stuff become irrelevant and just sign with who you feel like you should sign with, and the draft becoming almost a vestige of a bygone era?
Well, it's almost mirroring, and you made a good point, and it's also mirroring now what's going to happen to the high school kids. Because of the portal and because of name, image, likeness, of course. And you're talking about name, image, likeness. But again, and you can see behind me the cereal box, but take Caitlin Clark, for example. What her salary is going to be 80,000 or something with the Fever.
Right.
But she's already got a $20 million Nike contract, and she was making more in nil money, almost $2 million a year at Iowa with State Farm and Nike and all the. She was making more there than really going. And that, some of the writers were questioning, said, Kayla, why not stay in school? You're going to make more money probably at the University of Iowa. You have another year. Go,
Right.
Go ahead and stay. I read a thing yesterday also talking about high school kickers, and they're saying now that high school kickers are going to go by the wayside, no matter how good they are, because colleges are just looking for the portal guys who have experience, and they feel that position that wins a ton of games, they feel that position needs to be a portal guy, somebody who's played, whether it's
Wow.
D3 or D2.
But you mentioned that, and you did some brilliant stuff back in the old days. We had a great segment you did on the Virginia High School League and Name, Image, Likeness.
Right,
Matt,
right. How
which
they
I
were
think
getting
was
involved,
they got out ahead of it to a degree in there. So I think it is important for parents to understand. And if I've called my share of high school football games. A high school team with a great kicker is notable. So I think
absolutely.
Just like parents are told, teach your kids to throw left-handed if they like baseball.
Right.
If you want your kids to have a long NFL lucrative career, teach them to kick.
Yeah, I loved, and then last night, I'll wrap up with this. Last night, of course, typical Bill Belichick fashion, they asked him about the Patriots and Drake May. 4 words. They compared him to Josh Allen, and Belichick said, "We'll see about that." So 4 words.
This is why Bill's broadcast career is not going to last for very long, about as long as his answers for things. Mac, thank you, sir. You have a great weekend.
All right.
Catch something big and pointed.
I'll report my first deep sea ocean fishing trip, and I will report Monday. The weather has changed. 25-mile-an-hour winds. Dramamine cocktails tonight. Dramamine cocktails tomorrow. So
well, he puts the
all right, man.
He puts the mean in Dramamine. He is Mac McDonald. I'll talk to you in the morning, sir. That's it. Reel him in.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
In the morning. Thank you for tuning in and using the Rumble app. If you are, I don't know if you can do YouTube the way Bill the Grill Guy did his Rumble app, where he was able to get the Rumble app on his car, stereo, and all of that. But certainly, however you're enjoying and engaging with us, that's fine. So earlier we were playing some clips from the Virginia 7th Congressional District Forum, and we got some calls on that. So let me get to those before we get too far afield into anything else.
Hey, Joe, couple things on the show this morning. You talked about the lives lost as a result of the Civil War. And here's the thing about that. Every time somebody wants to centralize and concentrate power, there are a lot of lives lost. And to the people that want the power concentrated, human toll doesn't mean a whole lot as long as they get to concentrate the power. Now, the other thing, one of your candidates mentioned the current protests that are going on college campuses and suggested that perhaps some of the protesters were not students. Joe, it's very easy to differentiate between students and protesters that have been brought in to agitate. Ask one of them, why are you here? What are you protesting? Why do you support Hamas? If they begin to tell you why, that's an outside agitator. If they look at the person next to them and say, why are we protesting? That's a student. And that's how you can tell the difference there, Joe. Keep doing what you do.
All right, thank you. And of course, 434-882-4217. You call, you leave a voicemail. Apologies, we haven't reset the voicemail port, so it might throw you off if you call because it's a new phone. I had to get a new phone, and it's not that I dislike phones, and it's not because I'm a klutz that I like to have cases, but I don't know if they intentionally make these phones so slippery. I've held sticks of butter in my hands that are easier to maintain a grip on than these cell phones, and it is maddening to try to do that. The Hamas agitators, I want to get into this a little bit because the University of Southern California has actually canceled its commencement ceremonies, its public commencement ceremonies, because they were afraid of the protests. Actually came up during the speech. I think Derek Anderson was talking about how he was inspired by Mike Johnson going to Columbia University to face the pro-terrorist protesters at Columbia and try to stare them down, if you will, or say, listen, you're protesting on the side of a cause that is inhuman. Do we have the, and I love this clip, I bring this up because there was a story in the UK Daily Mail, I believe, on this as well. Again, more protesters for Palestine. This one was, again, transgender for Palestine, and I had to chuckle at that, of course, because we all know that the issue of transgender in places like the Palestinian Authority and things like that are laughable to think, when these folks get there. Look, can we get the clip of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the man who did at the time run Hamas because he ran Iran for the Ayatollah of rock and roll?
In Iran, we don't have homosexuals like in your country. We don't have that in our country.
So, and my favorite part of that is the awkward laughter of I believe that was actually Columbia University as well, where Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was giving that address back in the years ago. Yes, it was Columbia University, the very same university that is seeing these protests in favor of Hamas, and you're seeing these folks who are out there saying, I'm the LGBTQ community for Palestine. And what's happened, we have the story from the UK Daily Mail is wonderful. It's a commentary piece, but it's going through the chronological protests that are seeing themselves across Britain and across the United States, the pro-terrorist movements. And what's happening is people who would be beheaded if they showed up in Tehran with their rainbow T-shirt on and said, I am gay. And they said, no, you're not, you're dead. That's why Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said, we have no homosexuals in Iran. And everyone went, what does he mean by that? Because if you espouse that publicly, and I mean literally, this isn't just, the American, like, this is the end. No, they actually. And that's what I find sad in our society today. And Dr. Clark talking about the agitators versus the students. The agitators may at least know what the agenda is. The outside agitators might know what the agenda is because George Soros sent them all, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and they were reading it up, and they said, oh, well, here's the talking points. And they're ready when the cameras start showing up. They know what to do. If somebody shows up with a smartphone and starts recording them, they know the role they're supposed to play. The students have been indoctrinated by the university professors. There was a New York City Council person, notable because she's a Republican, and people said, hold it, Joe, there are Republicans in New York? Hey, I grew up in New York City, and I was always this way. I mean, I might not have known it was conservatism until I started reading Russell Kirk, the originator of American conservatism, in his analysis of Edmund Burke, really. And I say that because I think people need to read that. There's a New York City councilwoman was on the news yesterday talking about how these students are just the subject of indoctrination by their professors. And again, this goes back to something we were talking about in abstract. And they're like, oh, you people, you nattering nabobs, you don't, you're just mad because they don't agree with you. No, it's not that it's not whether or not they agree or not. They're not following the intellectual pursuit to that disagreement. I don't mind somebody who has intellectually thought through all the points of Marxism per se, and then said, Joe, I disagree with you on your free market stuff, and then run that out. I'll have that discussion with you. I have plenty of people who believe the government should be helping the poor people, and they're ardent in their belief because they're living in the right now of there are people who are abjectly poor. And I don't disagree with them on the fact that there are people who are abjectly poor. I just know that there are better answers, and that there are answers you can come up with in short term that will address the poverty right now, that will also allow us, as the timeline goes on, to address the poverty later. But this issue over the indoctrinated students who are being taught what to think rather than how to think, because they have been the fruit of this popularity culture where everything is about how many retweets do I get. This is almost self-segregating into a world of the social credit score. So these students, in often case, whether or not they agree or even have thought through what the Islamist terrorist movement is about, they just want to be seen in the right place. They just want to be seen with the right group. And that's time-honored teen think. But what's dangerous is the professorial class making tons of money subsidized by you and me. And we all rail and protest about the subsidization of things like Planned Parenthood, but think about the subsidization of the university system where these professors make mid-six-figure salaries with honorariums and they've got book deals and then they go into the classroom and say, we must protest against the occupiers. And it is West versus East. When we come back, I'm going to go pull this article up from the UK Daily Mail because it lays out exactly what I've been saying all along. This battle that started years before October 7th, 2023, is a battle of East versus West. The Eastern Orthodox authoritarianism versus Western liberty and freedoms. That's what the battle line is orthodoxy of Marxist, and really the Islamist movement is Marxist, because they realized that there was so much commonality between the authoritarian states that it was easy enough to kind of inculcate both sides of it. So the battle lines are East versus West, not just Israel versus Hamas, but Israel as an exemplar of Western civilization. And you can say, well, what about Ukraine and Russia? Completely different thing. And this whole idea of lumping it all together, as I said, this is what happens when, with apologies to those who realize what the Kama Sutra means when they say you're engaging in Congress, and why we often feel like we've engaged in Congress with the wrong sort of folks.
A couple of mild days ahead, then the heat turns on. For your Friday forecast, partly sunny, afternoon highs around 63. Slight chance of a shower after midnight on Friday, otherwise mostly cloudy and 48. Slight chance of a shower before noon on Saturday, mostly cloudy and 66. We're mostly cloudy and 53 on Saturday night, sunny and 83 on Sunday. By Monday, boy, pre-summer, afternoon highs near 90. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining us. Cue Mahmoud Ahmadinejad one more time for us, please. I did get that story up from it's the Telegraph.
In Iran, we don't have homosexuals like in your country. We don't have that in our country.
And, of course, the reaction is priceless. That is also Columbia University years ago when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran, the man who did all the dirty work for the Ayatollah of rock and roll. So Ryan Zickgraf, writing for the UK Telegraph, title of the article is Meet the New Left, who think Hamas are good and that swastikas are woke. Like, the refusal to view political struggles as anything beyond good and evil has led progressives down a dark path. And yes, I think we all realize that, but like Martin Niemöller wrote, first they came for the trade union, first they came for the conservatives, and I didn't say anything because my parents are conservatives, and I said, eventually they're going to come for you. It wasn't long ago, Zickgraf writes, it wasn't long ago when the activist left had a whole laundry list of systems and impersonal forces that it was battling against. Sexism, homophobia, white supremacy, ableism, you name it. The millennial left may have nodded along with Bernie Sanders' old labor left leanings, still they largely abandoned the class struggle of old for a struggle against boutique oppressions that were contingent but intersecting, hence the rise of so-called intersectionality. That's the once trendy academic philosophy that relies on a view of power relations of society. So the idea that there are people who are making you do things that you wouldn't do otherwise. And it's an easy excuse, by the way, if I may insert here, saying, well, I didn't do this because oppression has kept me from achieving anything. It's an easy excuse, this intersectionality. So he goes on to write in his Telegraph column, Zickgraf, so in the wake of the shock of the massive Israel-Hamas war since October 7th and a lack of purpose after political failures of left-wing populism, the Western left has found a way to get its groove back by simplifying yet expanding its moral framework. Goodbye intersectionality, he writes. Hello, quote, it's all one thingism. In this nebulous new cosmology, Palestinians, even Hamas themselves, aren't just engaged in a specific geopolitical fight over territory and resources. No, they're the tip of the spear of a perceived collective liberation against the West, the global North, quote, colonizers. And I appreciate John Sutz, loyal listener and great researcher, sent me this story last night while I was at this congressional forum, and it is what you and I have talked about how many times now? That this is East versus West. This is the collectivist Eastern authoritarianism versus Western liberty. And the problem with Western liberty right now is most of the people in the West had given up on it. Because, as we started the show with old Lyndon Johnson and his Great Society speech, we were expecting government to create a society based on abundance and liberty rather than freedom and prosperity. Do we have crazy old LBJ?
Rich and elevate our national life and to advance the quality of our American civilization. Your imagination and your initiative and your indignation will determine whether we build a society where progress is the servant of our nation, or a society where old values and new visions are buried under unbridled growth.
Yeah, by the way, let me insert here before we go back to Crazy Lyndon. Indignation. So understand, kids, you 25 and 30-year-olds who have friends, you're probably, if you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, you're probably of the same mind, like, my gosh, these people are nuts. And maybe you're just coming to this saying, hold it, the circular firing squad of like, well, I was against this until this person became against this, and then I have to be against this other person. This chasing your tail has probably led you to Rumble saying, who in hell is making sense? Or maybe you saw Bill Maher and said, well, hold on, I thought Bill Maher was on my side. Why does he make fun of me now? Because the more you chase your tail, the more you become the fodder for a political version of cat videos in social media. But indignation, 60 years ago, kids, your parents probably weren't even born when Lyndon Johnson gave that speech about a society driven by its collective indignation. Anyway, this is the commencement address to the University of Michigan.
For in your time, we have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society. On abundance and liberty for all. It demands an end to poverty and racial injustice,
could be against that,
to which we're totally committed in our time.
So Lyndon Johnson's address begins this track towards the progressive. So this is why it seems like there are nary few people in the West anymore who want to fight against the Eastern authoritarians, because the Western leaders have co-opted themselves into the get along to go along capitulation, the appeasement. Every time somebody comes with a stick and starts swinging it at the leaders of the global West, the liberty-believing, the leaders, like their great hero Neville Chamberlain, said, well, let's just give them what they want. This is why, as we discussed yesterday morning on this program, you have groups like Jews for Palestine, who believe that if they stop supporting Israel, that the terrorists will stop terrorizing. This was the same thing that happened after September 11th, 2001, where there was a mass movement to say, it's our fault they did this. And certainly there are places where we have screwed up internationally, and true leaders in the American West can acknowledge that our behavior in Iran, helping to overthrow a democratically elected prime minister in favor of a brutal dictator named the Shah, leads to guys like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad saying, we have no homosexuals in Iran. And there's a reason they don't have any. So when you see the rainbow-clad protesters saying LGBTQ for Palestine, mention to them that maybe, Gaza City would be an interesting place to start their next rally, to see how the Islamists will treat them. Because they're not as nearly as inclusive as our intellectual elites would have you believe. They appreciate what they're doing here in the United States as it comes to weakening the position of the libertarian West. But you show up on their block, just like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said, there is no LGBTQ community in Gaza City. And the leadership of the West has lost its intesticle fortitude. That's a phrase I used to use on the radio program frequently. If you're just experiencing, I'm not misspeaking. I say intesticle fortitude as in you got to have a set. Ladies, you too. If our leadership has lacked the intesticle fortitude to stand up for what's right versus wrong versus what was politically adept at the moment, or that their consultants said were politically adept at the moment, and then, therefore, you see the Chamberlain-esque appeasements. So while the authoritarian East continues to rape and pillage and slit throats in an effort to make the libertarian West leadership say, no, please stop. We'll give you everything you want. Well, we just had the leader of Hamas, or one of the leaders of Hamas, say just yesterday that if you give us a state, we'll stop doing this. Well, this is why the Palestinian Authority was started. But because nobody says, hold on a second here, didn't you have a state? Wasn't that what the Palestinian Authority was all about? Wasn't this the capitulation to a 10-year-old, 15-year-old two-state solution? This was John McCain's two-state solution, was the Palestinian Authority. And now they're back saying, well, we won't come in and slit all the throats of your concert goers and rape their dead corpses if you give us a state. And no one except you and me are saying, hold on a second here. You had one. What happened? It wasn't the state they wanted. See, as sad as it sounds, what's really happening is the Palestinian Authority and Hamas are looking at the greener grass on the other side of the fence. They look at Israel and their agriculture and their industry and their prosperity, and they say, well, we want that money. And so as much as they wrap this stuff in the intellectual political pursuits that you might expect from the authoritarians, it's really just the same old story. It's the same old, they've got more money than I do, so I want it. I want them to give me the money that I don't have. And that's the little bit, and people say, my gosh, Joe, you conservatives, you Hannity, Lars Larson, Limbaugh, all these guys, you just go on and on and on. It's crazy making. I mean, look at these gray hairs. I'm 30. No, not 30. But I had a lot of these gray hairs already at 30. It's the never-ending pursuit of authoritarianism. And as Dr. Clark, who we played his phone call earlier, has oft said to us, Communism is not a failure. When you realize that communism's goal is to centralize power and authority into the hands of a very few people, it's a raging success. It kills lots of people. It kills as many people, if not more, than Islamism. But they've now teamed up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be such a doggy downer on the heading into a weekend. I hope you have an amazing weekend. I'm going to go have an amazing weekend because God gives me my rights, not Mike Johnson, not Joe Biden. God gives me my rights. God gives you your rights. God gives residents of Tehran their rights. They just don't happen to live in a country that respects those yet. So I hope you have an amazing weekend. We will convene again on Monday morning. Until then, so long, and thanks for all the fish.